Thanks. So welcome everyone. Hey, I love this. I'm actually part of the Tinder generation, but maybe this is the next thing in dating. Just go around and say I want to meet you. But good to be here. My name is Stephan. I'm Dutch. I came in from Amsterdam, and it's my real pleasure sort of opening this event with all of you today. And we started the year actually pretty interesting. We were at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we got pretty excited by everything that was discussed there. And then, based on some of those learnings that we got from Davos, we interacted with 25 COOs and chief supply chain officers. And we really asked them the question, what is top of mind if you think about, supply chain and supply chain transformation? Not maybe today, but in the next couple of years. What do you expect from technology companies like O9 and others in terms of how do we help, solve some of the challenges that you're facing, and how do you see the world developing, and what is the role of supply chains? So what we did, we put together sort of an overview of what are the top 3 things that are top of mind, and we want to share that with you today. Then would love to talk a little bit about Gen AI. Now, every one of you is likely using ChatGPT. A lot of you are asking, okay, it's great in the consumer type of environment, but what's the application of Gen AI in supply chains? And we're putting in some serious R&D investments in Gen AI. We want to present you where we are at today and where we believe, some of the use cases will come out, later this year, next year. And then we would love to have a dialogue, like, does it make sense? What are you seeing? Yesterday over dinner, actually, we had a couple of discussions and say, what's your Gen AI strategy? And I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out and would love, to have a dialogue and understand what you're doing. So that's number 2. Number 3, we want to talk about what are the 5 things that we believe you need to get right if you think about a planning transformation. Give you a quick update, what's going on with O9, and then aim 10x on tour as well. This is the 3rd event we've done this year. We have 9 more. So we started in Hong Kong, then we did Bangkok, now Munich. And what is the reason that we're bringing you together? I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'll kick off. What's top of mind? The first thing that's top of mind for a lot of organizations is the concept of tribal knowledge. And what we are finding in planning, 80% of the planning data and the knowledge is tribal. What do I mean with tribal? It sits in the heads of the planners, or it sits in standalone spreadsheets. And that is causing a lot of problems, because if I'm a business unit manager in an organization and they say, hey, what if demand goes up by 10%, can supply chain support? It takes days, sometimes even weeks, to get a fast answer. At the same time, if I am in a supply allocation decision, and I need to make a decision, and I see Patrick sitting there and Mega sitting there, and I know that Patrick is, he's German, he's providing very robust forecasts, very trustworthy. But Mega is sandbagging the forecast all the time. But I have the experience that Patrick is very reliable, so I'm going to allocate supply to Patrick. But that is my tribal knowledge as a supply planner in the organization. So how do you digitize that knowledge? And I think that's where we are working on, and I'll share a couple of examples, in putting that tribal knowledge into digital knowledge so that we can ultimately use that in planning and decision making. So that's, I would say, the first big trend that we are seeing. And companies are truly realizing that you can't do Gen AI if you haven't digitized your tribal knowledge. So how do we digitize tribal knowledge? Number 1. Number 2, and this is not a new concept, but obviously, where are you getting surprised in your supply chain is upstream. It's in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and so forth. So 1, how do you build a more robust picture of your upstream supply chain? Then how do you collaborate with suppliers in a much better way? And how do you ingest different risk signals? There's a lot of companies that say, hey, I've invested in Resolink, I've invested in Exeger, I've invested in Intro, so I get all those risk signals. But if you can't propagate that risk signal through the supply chain and understand which demand will be impacted, then it's a nice screen with a lot of risks, but it's very hard for you to actually make any different decisions. Now, the other thing that we are seeing, the trend is, especially in Europe, companies start to way better collaborate with their supply base on Scope 3 emissions. But now when you're collaborating on scope 3, you can then also collaborate on capacities and orders and inventory and forecast. So we see ESG as a means to actually enable collaboration with your supply base. And we have now technology that allows you to do actually collaboration and risk management on the platform, but then connected with planning. So we see an emergence of what we call SRM, supplier risk and relationship management, combining with supply planning and bringing that together. So number 2, big trend, we see companies very interested in investing. And then number 3 is the concept of touchless planning. Now, what is touchless planning? If I create a supply plan or if I create a demand plan, I want to understand how often does that get touched by a planner in terms of making manual changes. And what we are finding, let's say we deploy the capability and we create a supply plan, we want to understand how much touchless that plan is. And very often what we see is implementation, we are in a go live, we track touchless, and touchless is only 30 or 40%. What we then do, we do a post-game of every single touch. And for instance, what we saw at one of our clients, a supply plan was created, and they started to make all kinds of manual changes. And then we did a post-game and said, why are you making all those changes? And they said, look, the capacity of my packaging lines are not modeled. So in essence, it was unconstrained, and I'm constraining it manually. We said, but why have we not modeled it? And they said, yeah, we could never do that in APO. We said, yeah, but you can do that now in '09. So we pulled the data in '09, and we have now modeled it. So the next round, the touchless went up from 35% to 40%. Then we did the review on the next touch. Right? So what that is doing you, that concept of touchless planning, it's actually helping you to understand where the data is missing. You then ingest the data on the platform, and you start building out a much more robust data repository of your supply chain planning parameters. And I think this is critical, because a lot of times you're talking to organizations and say, I'm doing a big data cleansing exercise for supply chain. I said, great. What are you cleansing? Like, how do you prioritize? There's a lot of data. And the moment you actually don't know the answer on that question, then what is the project all about? So our perspective is, do and introduce the concept of touchless planning. It's going to tell you, where your data gaps are and what you can do about it. Then I think very important is we see the need for touchless in the, let's say, SNOE horizon, the next 16, 18 weeks. We believe you can bring that to 80, 85, 90%, because it's all about fast response to changes. In the maybe mid to longer term horizon, we see that to 70, 75%, because that's where also much more debate is needed in terms of the different decisions that you're making. So that's one thing. The other thing is then ultimately, once we have digitized tribal knowledge and brought that to digital knowledge, and we can actually enable touchless planning, then obviously what if scenario planning should be way faster. And that's another big capability that we see companies are really wanting to implement and wanting to use. So those are sort of top of mind and where we are working on and supporting our clients on those journeys. So summarizing, number 1 is tribal to digital knowledge. Number 2 is use ESG as a means to enable upstream visibility and collaboration. And then it's all about hyper-automation and touchless planning. Now, let's talk a little bit about Gen AI, because a lot of you have asked questions, what's '09's vision on Gen AI? What are you guys doing? Where's your R&D roadmap going? And on one side, we have what we call the digital knowledge graph model, and that's sort of the fundamental architecture of the '09 platform. So that we feel we have figured that out, but obviously there is a big journey to get tribal to digital knowledge. Then on the other side, where we are now innovating is what we call generative AI agents. Now, what is an agent? See an agent as a digital personal assistant that can actually execute a lot of different tasks at speed and at the same time. Now then, how to think about it? Why would we invest in that? So what is the big sort of use case for Gen AI? On one hand, it gives us that knowledge boost, right? We are not longer dependent on all those spreadsheets and all the planners and the knowledge they have in their heads. On the other side, we believe that the transformation speed in organizations can be accelerated in a very big way. And the third big component is ultimately how do we drive the organization to be much more productive? And I'll share a couple of examples of that. So where are we on the journey? We have created two types of agents today. In the top layer, you find what we call atomic agents. So what is an atomic agent? An atomic agent is your digital assistant. In a conversational way, you can do fairly simplistic tasks. So you can get data, you can edit data, and then you get a summary of insights and findings. So for instance, give me a forecast. You can just type. Then the system should say, okay, which forecast, which product line, which time horizon, and so forth. And ultimately, you start answering the questions, you get the information. Today, again, it seems simplistic, but organizations spend a lot of time actually getting useful data to analyze. So that's the first thing. We've done a couple of pilots. We feel we're there. That's something that we are deploying at clients. The second thing is what we call composite agents. Those are a series of tasks that we are digitizing and that the digital agents should be able to perform. So an example is, run a scenario. My demand goes up by 10%. Can supply chain support? Obviously, you go through different steps to do that. First, you have to increase a scenario where the demand is up by 10%. Then you need to see, what's my inventory on hand? Do I have sufficient manufacturing capacity? And so forth, and so forth. Now, if you think about it, today, if you run a scenario like that, your organization is doing this already. There's a planner that's, executing that, and he's following a certain recipe. And the whole concept is we digitize that recipe. But what is interesting here, especially in large organizations that have 1,000 planners, assume we can point who is the best planner in the organization. And we sit next to the planner, and we ask the planner, hey, this is a scenario, why don't you actually educate us what you would normally do? And let's say that we digitize that recipe, and now that recipe becomes available to all the planners in the organization. So imagine the knowledge boost that you can give your organization, as well as the productivity gain that you can get the moment you do that well. So those are a couple of the innovations that this is all in pilot stage at the moment. So we have 6, 7 clients where we are piloting this with. We hope before the end of the year that this is robust and tested, that we can actually deploy that with all of you. But that gives you a sense of what we are working on. And especially in the breaks, we'll talk a little bit more about this and can go a level deeper. Now, what I want to do, I want to show you a quick video where you see some of this in action, and I will sort of narrate this video. So can you run a scenario to evaluate supply chain impact where the demand for Q3 goes up by 20%? So you can see on the right-hand side, you have a digital assistant. And you can now, write questions, and you can get an answer now from your digital assistant. So I can evaluate the demand upside scenario, and here's the expert recipe. So then it's asking me, okay, do I want to create a new scenario, or do I do that in the working scenario? So you choose. And then it says, okay, I'm now creating your demand upside scenario. So again, on the right-hand side, you have the interface where you type the questions. On the left-hand side, you get all the reports. Now then, the next thing you have created that, you can say, okay, then show me my best fit forecast report with all the insights. So again, then your report is loaded on the left, and then you can start interacting again with that report. So now I want to change the item filter. I want to make an edit. So all of that, you do that in a conversational way. And all the insights is provided, on this side. So you have always that visibility to the changes that you're making or the questions that you're asking, you get all the answers. So now you can say, okay, why don't you increase the product line forecast for a certain period for a certain product line? So then it says, okay, that's good, but to assist you better, again, there's a couple of questions that you get that you need to answer. So it's also forcing you to ultimately get the answers on the questions so that the system can, perform the tasks. So here you can say, okay, we have increased it. Are you okay with this or not? Or do you want to make any further changes? And then again, you keep sort of interacting with the platform, in many different ways. So this is very short, 30 seconds, but you give a sense of the look and feel how we think about that. So on the right-hand side, you have your digital assistant. On the left-hand side, you have all your screens, how you interact with the system. So that's one. Now, the other thing that I want to talk a little bit more about is if we think about a planning transformation, what are some of the important features that we should think of? We already talked a lot about planning data and tribal to digital. But the other one is very important, is how do we drive the change? And our perspective is you do that through data and policies. I think the best company that we serve when it comes to policies is Samsung. And they have a very famous policy. They call this NFNA. Anyone that has a clue what that stands for, except for the 09ers? No forecast, no allocation. So in a lot of companies, if you forecast 100 and you sell 200, you're the hero. They don't have that at all. At the same time, if you forecast 100 and you only sell 50, that's a problem as well. So they are really, really good in implementing policies to drive the change in the organization. So NFNA is just one of many examples. The other thing that they do is cycle over cycle leaderboards. I forecasted 100, actuals coming in. My plant was supposed to manufacture 200. Did they do that? Yes or no? So you drive change to actually understanding what's happening, and you track plan attainment, planning attainment, plan attainment, and so forth, to leaderboards, and that's how you then have discussions in your organization. So that's important. Number 3, I think there's a lot of discussion about this. Do I need to get a template out of the box, or do I need to have something flexible? Our perspective is, it's a hybrid. So yes, you want to use industry best practices that we have built. At the same time, you need to have a platform that's flexible. Why? Because the moment your business changes and your platform is not flexible, all kinds of Excel spreadsheets are popping up. So in the example that I gave before, if you can't model ESG data, spreadsheet. If you want to connect your Salesforce opportunity pipeline with your forecasting, but you can't do that, spreadsheets. So what we are seeing, a lot of planning transformations fail because they lack the flexibility that the moment your business is changing and you cannot model that change, spreadsheets pop up everywhere. So that's a very important one. I want to give you a quick update and a refresher on what we are working on. So what's super important to us, if you think about 09 and the breadth and depth that we cover, it all starts with the data. And we know that data is unstructured. We know that data is tribal. We know that data sits in spreadsheets, different systems. I see my friends at Pirelli at the back. We did an event with them, and they said, we have integrated 60 different systems. So think about all the different data, all the different sources that you need to bring together. So we turn data into knowledge and insights, and then we allow for different plans. Now, many of you know 09 as core supply chain planning, demand planning, supply planning, S&OP. What we have done over the past years, based on actually input from our clients, we've expanded in 3 big areas. One is upstream, that we talked about, supplier risk, supplier collaboration. Second one is ESG. A lot of times clients said, hey, you have modeled the digital twin of my supply chain. You've modeled costs, constraints, lead times, you name it. Why don't you model water usage, electricity, carbon, waste, and so forth? So we can now actually model a carbon and ESG footprint of a supply chain, given the flexibility of the modeling construct that we have. So that's number 2. And number 3 is downstream, what we call revenue growth management, initially focused on retail and consumer products companies. It's all about, if I spend X in commercial, promo, pricing, distribution, marketing, how do I make sure that I get a decent ROI, and how is that connected with demand planning? So we went through a lot of pilots over the past 2 years, and in all 3 solution areas, we believe we have a pretty differentiated product now that we can offer to all of you. Quick updates, important as well. Last year, we had more than 85 go-lives. So that means actually implementations, going live, clients using the system. That was a big milestone to us and something that we are pretty proud of. The second thing is that we grew our business by 50%. But a lot of clients, prospective clients, partners are saying, hey, 09, you guys are doing well, but are you not growing too fast? And I think that's a valid concern. And if I go back 2021, I think reflection is, yes, we were growing too fast. We might have taken on more demand than the supply that we had. So we had a demand-supply mismatch. We've been working really hard over the past 3 years to fix that. I feel we are in a much better place. The other thing that we did is to say, look, it's easy to say, I take on all the demand that's out there in the market, but we have decided that we kept the number of new clients that we work with to 40, so 40 every year. So in 2022, we did 38 new clients. Last year, we did 37, and this year, we will cap that to below 40 as well. Why? Because we believe it's way better to build deep and strategic relationships with our clients and then sort of keep expanding with them, given the fact that we are developing our product and can actually deliver much more value to them. So that's one thing that I think is important. The other thing is we raised incremental money from our existing investors, so they are sort of doubling down on O9. And where's the money going? It's really going into new product innovation. So we talked about Gen AI, but also those other 3 sets, ESG, RGM, SRM, is really important for us that we are always sort of on the forefront of innovation, and that simply requires investments in R&D that we are making. So it gives you a sense of where we are. We also started to work or have expanded work with a lot of very exciting companies across different industries. I already talked about Samsung. Samsung is 40 billion semiconductor and 160 billion electronics. We started with semi, now we're also doing electronics. We've expanded with Apple in chemicals, Indorama Ventures, food and beverage, Pepsi, Mondelez. I see Marelli is here. We are expanding with them. Big tier 1 supplier to the automotive. Automotive itself, Toyota, largest car maker in the world, where we are doing supplier relationship and risk management. So I'd say across industry verticals, we are expanding. Super exciting. And also, if you have any questions on any of those and what we are doing, some of those logos are actually in the room, so that's perfect. Some others not, but you can ask us in the breaks. So last one, where are we focused on? If you think about sort of R&D, on one side, it is sort of making investments in the platform itself. So new developments around UI, UX, AI, and so forth. Second one is what we talked about, the reference product. So what is the industry standard for demand, supply planning, S&OP, SRM, in fashion and apparel or in automotive? And sort of, creating that, what we call reference product, so that we can get you going. And then, on the growth side, we talked about the ESG, RGM, and SRM. So that gives you a sense of, where we are sort of focused on as an organization and, putting in the R&D investments. Now, the last thing is Aim 10x. So why is this not an O9 branded event? Because we believe that we should actually build a community of forward-looking thinkers in supply chain and beyond. And Aim 10x stands for AI Management Systems to drive 10x improvement. So it's a bold statement, but our perspective is if we don't aim for 10x, we don't get anything big done. If you aim for 2x, you maybe get 1.1. If you aim for 10, you get at least 3. So that's the thinking. And we did a big virtual event. Some of you have joined that. We had 10,000 plus people. It was pretty cool. And then we break out in different cities all across the world. So in Europe, we have Munich. Then later, we have Amsterdam. In the US, we have Chicago and Dallas. And then we are from Taipei to Shanghai to Sao Paulo. You can actually join all of them. If you join more than 5, you get a platinum stamp of Aim 10x. That would be pretty cool. But that's really the intent. And to Koen's point before, we want you to network, we want you to learn, we want you to share your knowledge and gain knowledge, hopefully. And hopefully we can then see you back and you find this a useful event. We will also share with you a lot of the insights of the different sessions today, but if you become part of the community, there's a lot of white papers and interesting content that we produce and that we want to provide at no cost to all of you. Now, then, last thing, all of you have a gift under your seats. Don't take it yet. I'll show you what that is. And a lot of times when you go to those events, there's all kinds of goodies that you throw away, and it's not very sustainable. So the first thing that we did, what was always annoying us, was the lanyards. So all of you have a different type of lanyard, but you're going to reuse that. And you're going to reuse that with what you have under your seat. And that's important because we hate waste, so we want to make sure that everything we do is very sustainable. And that's why I play a video, watch the video, then get your gift that's under your seat, and then I ask Koen and Philippe to get back on stage.